That was Twisters, which is in theaters now. It's an American disaster film directed by Lee Isaac Chung, starring Daisy Edgar Jones, Glenn Powell, Anthony Ramos, Brandon Perea, something like that, Mara Tierney, and Sasha Lane, amongst others. The official IMDb plot synopsis for Twisters is a retired tornado chaser and meteorologist is persuaded to return to Oklahoma to work with a new team and new technologies.
Can you call a person in their mid-20s retired?
Retired of something, you can.
Right, I guess so.
They're not even retired. They work for the National Weather Service.
Yeah.
But she's not a tornado chaser anymore.
No.
That's what she retired from.
But she was a grad school tornado chaser.
I mean, if a pro basketball player leaves in his mid-20s, you would say he's retired from basketball.
Right, that's retiring from a career. She never even started a career.
She didn't have a career as a tornado chaser?
No, she was a grad student. She had maybe a student's interest as a tornado chaser.
It was part of her project.
Right, yeah, her thesis.
I think there's a legal definition of retired, and there's also like a colloquial definition of retired. This falls as the colloquial.
I am fine with her being called a retired tornado chaser.
Okay.
Me too.
Man, this girl has some trauma.
Before we get started, the person who sat right next to me had a blanket and it didn't turn her cell phone on once or talk. Didn't hear a peep from her.
I think that's normal from blanket people. I think that's the norm.
Right.
I think Kyle, who is a self-professed theater yeller. No, theater yeller.
That's not theater yeller. Theater raiser of voice.
You have yelled in theaters before in the middle of movies to Taylor Swift fans, no less. I think he's projecting onto blanket people some of his own worst thoughts.
Oh, I do not talk during a movie.
Well, that is again, no. You have just professed to yelling at Swifties.
Yeah. No talking, just yelling.
Just yelling. It's
wrong movie, guys.
Only the second Swiftie to come in gets yelled at. The first Swiftie gets a pass.
He gives
fool me once, shame on you.
One pass.
Right, exactly.
Then the yelling starts.
Yep. Pretty much anyone who comes in late to a movie, I'm just like, are you a Swiftie?
Before we jump into Twisters, I have no idea what you guys think of Twister from '96. Let's set the stage. Is this like a movie you guys were excited to see, or
the original Twister?
No, the new one. Like, were you excited because of the original, or like, what's the history going on here?
Oh, I had the only reason I saw this movie was for this podcast.
Oh, you wouldn't have seen it at all otherwise.
I would not see it at all otherwise. And, we can talk about my reaction to it. But like Twister, the original Twister, it was it was on TV a lot. I think it came out when we were in middle school, at least for Zach and I. So it was a popular movie for sure. I remember seeing it a lot. I remember like teachers playing it in the classroom, like before winter break.
Mm-hmm.
So there was definitely a lot of Twister exposure when it came out. And then it's not a movie that I really thought of much since the mid to late 90s. I don't think I've seen it in 30 years or however long it's been since it came out. Almost 30 years since it came out.
Interesting.
So, seminal in the fact that it's an era of nostalgia, but the movie itself, it was fun.
Sure.
For whatever reason, I was a very big Mad About You fan.
You were a big Mad About You fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked Mad About You. Remember that show, James?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I was excited for Twister when it came out because Helen Hunt was in it. And I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was really good. I love Twister. I thought it was funny. Funnier than this movie.
Sure.
And so, yeah, when I saw the trailer for Twisters, I was like, yeah, I want to see that. Plus, it kind of looked like akin to Twister. Like, it didn't look like it was like crazy CGI that looked totally different. It kind of looked like the same film grade,
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was looking forward to it. I mean, yeah, it's got Glenn Powell, who's everywhere these days. But
He really is. He's everywhere.
I heard a funny description of him, and I can't get it out of my head anymore.
Mm-hmm.
and someone described Glenn Powell as having a size 10 head with a size 8 face.
That's funny.
I mean, I understand the basics of what that means, but so his features don't fit on his face? Is that what we're saying?
I think, you know,
No, they definitely fit on his face.
You know, I'm looking at a photo. It's not terribly off.
No, but like all his features are kind of like in the middle of his head, right?
Right.
He's a lot of space on the perimeter of his head.
I think it's small eyes that does it.
Maybe like, does he have small, narrow eyes?
He does.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the small eyes. He's got small eyes. Interesting. All right. I
like Glenn. I have nothing against Glenn Powell. I just thought that was a funny description of him physically.
I have nothing against him either. So the original Twister came out in 1996, which is the same year that I graduated high school. And I remember going to see it with friends, it being kind of like a summer event movie.
Yeah.
And I like Twister. It's not a top 500 movie for me, but it is a good example of a movie that knows exactly what it was. And it delivered that to the best of its ability. And because of that, it's like nothing amazing, but it's also perfectly competent movie for what the goal was.
It's a fun movie, the original Twister.
Yeah, absolutely. But it didn't exactly elevate a genre or anything. It just did what it needed to do and got out. And so I appreciated it. Also, I appreciate the comedy of the original. There's a lot of like goofiness to it.
Yeah.
That felt a little more 80s than it did mid 90s when we had a lot of indie films that were like a real self-serious and stuff like that. So it was kind of refreshing in the moment from my memory of way back then. So now, how many years later? 28 years later, we're getting a sequel. I think this is a sequel, but also a sequel that barely references the original.
Yeah, it's I don't want to call it a remake, but there's nods to the original, but it doesn't really feel that connected. There's hardly any mention, or I don't think there's any mention at all of the events of the first movie.
They talk about Dorothy.
Right.
Yeah, and Dorothy's in the movie. So like that plants you in the world of, okay, this is the same world as Twister.
Yeah.
But no one's saying like, oh yeah, 28 years ago when so and so happened or something
Which
like
I
that.
think is a great way to do a sequel, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, so much time has passed. Let's not live in the past anymore.
Sure. Well, towards the end of this discussion, maybe let's talk about some of the cameos in it and some of the cameos that aren't in it. Because I think they missed some moments here that they probably could have, gotten a cheap pop out of people.
Sure.
And for this type of movie, I'm not against that for sure. Okay. So in Twisters, you've got this young lady in her 20s who experiences something traumatizing related to tornadoes. And then fast forward 5 years into the future, she's asked to come back and work on tornado chasing again. And she does, even though she's still traumatized by what happened 5 years earlier. And over the course of the movie, she overcomes her fear with the help of the other characters in the movie, including Glenn Powell, who seems to have taken a romantic interest as well as a intellectual interest in her.
Yeah.
And
she's the smartest one in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can say Glenn Powell plays sort of a YouTuber who's a tornado chaser.
Sure.
He's live streaming. He's got a following. He's doing things like, stunts within the tornado that you can see other YouTubers, doing similar things to that. So
I will say, like, his character is definitely a live streaming YouTuber, right? That's his character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't come across as like an actual YouTuber at all. Like, he seemed very different from like what you might actually see on YouTube to me.
What was it? His buddy who seemed more of like the stereotypical YouTuber, the one who's like wahooing throughout the whole movie?
No, the whole crew, none of it really felt like a YouTube situation to me at all. It seemed like what a boomer would think a YouTuber is like.
Yep.
Do you wish they were like richer kids? Is that what you wanted from them?
It didn't hit the sensibility for me at all. James,
Okay.
do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, it didn't feel genuine, and I think most YouTubers just feel more genuine, even if they're performing in their YouTube videos. I didn't buy him as a guy who spends his entire day chasing tornadoes and streaming on YouTube. I mean, it's not the kind of movie where you have to buy that for it to be successful, but
I agree.
But yeah, your description of it's somebody's idea of what a YouTuber is versus the reality, I would agree with that.
Well, as someone who does not watch a lot of YouTube, it did not bother me whatsoever.
Sure.
Maybe all like the hooting and hollering got to be a little annoying, but it didn't feel inauthentic.
Sure. I mean, it kind of reminds me of other movies, none in particular that I can think off the top of my head, but sometimes when young people talk, it sounds nothing like the young people in my life, how they talk amongst each other.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that there aren't other pockets of people that are not the kids around or the teenagers around me. And maybe other pockets do talk that way, but none around me talk like that. So I don't know. All right. Well, I rewatched the first movie earlier this week, and there was definitely a lot to compare to it. We should say before we get into the nitty gritty of the movie itself that this, I guess, is like a spoiler review, but it's not that kind of movie where it really matters. So we're not gonna necessarily try to spoil things or go scene by scene or anything. But if you don't want to hear anything, then maybe hit pause. Otherwise, we're just gonna kind of talk openly about the movie. So fair warning. So in the original movie, you've got a corporation chasing the tornadoes for reasons. And in this movie, in that movie, you had kind of the wild cowboy group who were just into tornadoes, basically. And they had no corporate backing, yet were scrappy and getting the job done. And then in this movie, you pretty much have the same situation. They just flipped it a little by having the main character side with the corporation in the beginning and then flip-flop halfway through.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. I just didn't. I like evil corporations when they don't humanize them. And in this one, it's like they couldn't even make the evil corporation fully evil type of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a couple, they had the backer, I guess, was the evil guy. And then there was his man on the crew, Ben or whatever, who was sort of the face of evil or the face of the corporation. But yeah, like the rest of the people
wasn't that evil.
I mean, he, when it came time to either help or make money, he wanted to make money.
Yeah, but he helped.
Oh, he didn't help. He got left. I'm not talking Anthony Ramos. I'm talking the other guy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's pretty evil.
The assistant to Anthony.
The assistant,
Ramos.
yes. Yeah, kind of the middleman between the chasers and the corporation.
Yeah.
Right.
But he was such a thin character. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is silly. That's not a dig on the movie. Because I think it's supposed to be kind of silly. It's for me, both this movie and the original are an effect shot looking for a movie. And I think that's okay. Like, you go see these movies for the effects. I did find the movie itself interesting. Like, kind of like you said, the flip on the original, having the corporation and the cowboys who are chasing storms around. The effects are great. Like the one where there's the tornado going through like an oil refinery or something that turns into a fireball. I thought that looked really cool. I thought a lot of this movie seemed to be shot like on location. They weren't in sound stages. They were outside shooting a movie. So that gave just a lot more realness to it. It had the classic shot of like cars driving through the wind with debris flying on them. Like the camera's kind of cocked to one side, and that sort of brought me back to the original. So like this movie was definitely referencing the original, both with Easter eggs, but also just I think in its visual aesthetic. James, you even mentioned like the film grain.
Mhm.
This would seem to actually be shot maybe on a film and not on digital, to kind of give you that same sort of authentic look to it. But you know, at the same time, like this movie tries to do some moralizing of like, you know, like, oh, we have to help people. And obviously you want to protect people from tornadoes, but also weather is super unpredictable. And they're not really trying to like predict the weather. There is sort of like a Dorothy-like experiment going on.
Mhm.
But at one point they're like, oh, we have to go to town and warn these people. And I'm just watching this movie like, these people all live in Oklahoma in Tornado Alley. Like, I think this small town knows what to do when a tornado comes. But like, there's a scene where there's this tornado coming, and like our main characters get to like a farmer's market, and they're like, come on, you guys got to go hide. Stop selling your wares. And I'm like, no, these people are not idiots. Like, they live in Oklahoma. I think they have warnings. They have eyeballs. They wouldn't just be like, oh, what's going on? So when you watch like I don't know, like a movie like Dante's Peak or something, where there's a volcano that's dormant and people don't know what to do, it makes sense. You have to have heroes to warn people, hey, here's what needs to happen in the situation. When you're watching a movie where it's about like a natural weather phenomenon that happens to an area often, it felt a little silly that they had to like be these heroes and save people and like teach them how to find shelter. So I don't think, as they said in this movie, it's not their first rodeo to have tornadoes.
Mhm.
I mean, that being said, I found it silly. It wasn't like I wasn't rolling my eyes. At no point was I watching this movie being like, oh, this is so stupid. Like, I was enjoying it the whole time. I did find the like the main character, she's trying to seed tornadoes. So they have something similar of like, oh, we're gonna have barrels, and those barrels are gonna get sucked up into the tornado. And it's again a callback to the original Twister with Dorothy. And I thought like the little flying probes in the first one was a much cooler visual than just
Mhm.
like white mist going up into a tornado. So
Yeah,
that was a bit of a miss there.
or the kind of like 3-point radar that they had going in Twisters with an S.
That was probably the silliest part of the movie.
Yeah, like we had to get in front of it. So yeah, so the whatever, the MacGuffin of this movie was not as fun, I think, as Dorothy of the original. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I was having a good time in the theater with this movie. What about Zach?
I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I think this was a worthy sequel to Twister. There was some cheesiness to it, you know, like when they're pretending to be younger, like in college or whatever.
Mhm.
They do this thing that some actors do where they like need to come across as much younger, where they like are much more exuberant about life and gesticulate wider, and you know, just like everything's a little, they're like Joy from Inside Out, you know, everything's just a little bit stretched and
They're innocent.
robust.
Right, yeah,
absolutely.
They haven't been beaten down by the world. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which carries across a little bit of, you know, like when they're just having all these happy, laughy conversations and everyone's so, you know, like forced happy kind of a thing. It comes across as a little cheesy, but it serves a point. But for the most part, I found this movie to be entertaining and a lot of action in it. There's one scene that takes place outside of like a motel, and I thought that was really well shot
Yeah.
and like exciting. There's a central romance, you know, a slow burn romance between the main female character and the main male character, Glenn Powell. And I thought it was really well handled. Like, they didn't hate each other at the beginning. There was just, you know, but I thought it was believable how they went from her just being kind of like annoyed by him to her actually like trusting and enjoying being around him.
Mhm.
And his side was believable from like being attracted yet also intrigued by her skills and stuff like that. I thought it was a really well done trajectory of romance that where it ended, as far as like the relationship ended, was not some like crazy high. It was like a very believable like kind of point of we'll see what happens the next movie, Twisters 3 or whatever. But
Right, they weren't like making out in a damaged barn after Twister just blown by.
exactly.
Like search another movie that
Yeah,
came out
exactly.
28 years ago.
So I really like that aspect of it. And I enjoyed their goal of trying to like get Twisters to dissipate. I thought that was a interesting goal and a good next step. So yeah, for the most part, I think I had a lot of fun with this movie. I don't have any major complaints at all.
I do.
Okay.
Lay it on, James.
I don't know if they're major. I mean, if you silo these two movies, right, the original and this one, there's obvious similarities, right? But there's like one major difference in my opinion, and that's tone. And the first movie, the characters, with the exception of Helen Hunt and what's his name? Bill Paxton, with the exception of those two, and to some extent them, but for the most part, their surrounding characters, they're all just such big caricatures in that movie that you never get the feeling like the movie wants you to take it seriously or to nitpick the science behind it or the logic of the fact that like wherever they turn, it's super easy to just catch up with a tornado, when in reality, that's not how it works. But it doesn't matter, because in that movie, they've set this tone where we're just having fun with this here, with this thing. And so logic, there's huge logic gaps compared to reality in the original Twister. And that's okay, because they've set the audience up for success to follow along in the fun. And in this one, I just missed all that. I felt like the surrounding characters, some of them felt like they were trying to be caricatures and others were serious. And even like some of their flaws were serious. Like the fiance character in the original is a fish out of water, and there was like no fish out of water in this movie.
Yes, there was.
Okay,
the journalist,
the reporter, but the reporter wasn't near as funny as the fiance in the original.
But he was British. Isn't that funny?
You're right. It's hilarious. I mean, the only thing I laughed at with him was when he decided not to ride with the Glenn Powell character at the end. That was like the only thing I found funny. And he wanted to be there. Whereas in the original, the fiance wants to be there until she experiences one tornado and then she's out. Like she realizes.
I think I would be the same.
Right. This is not for her. So it's not that they completely botched the tone on this one. I just feel like it's so well defined in the original. I wish they had defined it better here as well, because this one still has a lot of the logic issues that the original one had. They're just not leaving you, me personally, enough room as an audience member to just ignore those things and go along for the ride.
What were the biggest logical issues you had?
I mean, when I say logic, that's kind of like a surrogate for silliness. So in the intro, which happens, right at the beginning, clearly, the three people die, and that one guy gets literally ripped off of her body and like cartoonishly flies off into the storm.
People like anytime someone gets sucked up by a tornado, that's ridiculous.
Right. I think that happens.
Really? Like people get sucked out of their home from a tornado?
I don't think anyone in this movie got sucked out of a home.
Well, they got sucked out of bridges. They got sucked out of...
If you're in an open field, I think you could get sucked up.
What if you're in a movie theater? You can get sucked out of a movie theater? Like, cause that tornado was powerful enough to like suck the seats off of the concrete floor.
It was an F5.
Yeah.
Which, again, does not describe the strength of the winds. It describes the destruction it does. But
we can't judge a tornado while it's happening. How do you know it's an F5? You have to know after the fact.
I learned that in the movie.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, if a tornado can suck or pull theater seats off of concrete, could probably just collapse the whole building. So,
But it doesn't collapse it sucks it up.
brick by brick, just one at a time comes up,
Yes.
person by person. They're even bad at saving people. Like even people they try to save still get sucked up by the tornado. I guess less people get sucked by the tornado.
Yeah, they don't listen.
Towards the end, the Glenn Powell character is at the airport and he takes his truck and like jams the spikes into the ground
Yeah.
in the drop off of the airport. And again, I understand the movie is not reality, but they haven't created a tone where my brain doesn't immediately say like, if you really did that, they would be you'd barely make it out of the truck.
Arrested immediately.
Right. Exactly. So
and everywhere that I go, I've never like all those people who are working the curb at airports, they're all armed also.
Sure.
It's not just a guy in a high vis vest.
Yeah.
Oh, are they armed?
No. Like every airport I've been to, yes. Like usually it's the sheriff or it's someone with a lot more authority. Or like
at my airport, it's just people with a vest and a whistle.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I don't think any of
Okay.
them are armed.
Pretty much.
All right. Well, I'm pretty sure Dane County Airport, like the sheriff is the one who's running parking and yeah.
The sheriff is not the one running parking at the airport.
No,
A
deputies.
sheriff.
Yeah, the sheriff department.
Okay.
Not the literal
The
sheriff.
sheriff's
Sorry, the
department.
sheriff department. Sorry,
Barney Fife is not out there.
But you're right, James. I totally agree. Like when that happened, I was like, no, he's gonna get arrested immediately. You can't spike your truck in front of an airport.
When she chooses,
It was funny. It was a joke.
I get that, and it's fine. If people laughed at it, it's fine too. I think I may have even laughed at it, but this second after I laughed at it, I was like, this is not that movie where you just do that and everybody just accepts that like this is happening and it doesn't matter, basically. The hiding out in the pool without knowing that the pipes are exposed and stuff like that got me too. From a logic perspective, I was like, okay, I understand getting low to the ground and stuff like that, but if you just got in the pool and the pipes weren't exposed, like that's not a good place to be.
Well, hold on. Even if there are no exposed pipes, wouldn't it be safer to be in the pool than just on the street?
Depends how sucky the tornado is.
There were other places to be other than out in the open on the street.
Where?
Yeah, right. This is
The motel
Oklahoma.
just got destroyed.
They have no basements apparently in Oklahoma.
Well, they don't know where the basement is in the motel.
You think the owner doesn't, or I guess the guy did just start working there.
Just the fact that a tornado ran over the hotel she was staying at is a logic leap. Like the chances of that happening, slim to none. Now, that happened in the original Twister as well, so I understand why they're doing it here and why most people probably just went with it, but I had a hard time because the tone wasn't quite as wacky as in the first one. And so whenever they were doing these things that the first one got away with, I was just kind of like, why isn't it working on me this time?
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
I think it's a tone thing personally that they didn't.
Well, because the first one has the drive-in scene, right, where The Shining's playing and the tornado like sneaks up through the theater, and this one, the rodeo. I kind of saw those as the same scene more or less. And right, both times you have the main characters like feel the wind. They say, "Uh-oh, something's wrong," and then like they have to warn everyone. Yeah. But in these movies, tornadoes sneak up on you, just out of nowhere. Bam, there it is. Unless you can read the winds.
Here's the perfect example of them toning things down. The first movie, you got a cow flying around in a tornado that comes up towards the front windshield, and then it comes back around, and they make another joke about the cow, where she's like, "There's another cow," and he goes, "I think that's the same one." It's goofy. It would never happen in a tornado.
It's so memorable, though.
It's so memorable.
Oh yeah.
In this one, a chicken lands on a guy's hood after a tornado passes.
Right.
Like that's the substitute, and it's just nowhere near as heightened as what the 90s version was.
Yeah.
And so I was disappointed in that. But if you have never seen the original and you watch this one and you weren't making those comparisons while you were experiencing it, I could see how you could walk out and be like, that was fun, and then forget you saw it for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think this is going to be Top Gun Maverick, where people
No.
tell all their friends that they must go see it because it's just kind of like a average genre film disaster movie.
I was really disappointed when the water tower collapsed and it bursts open in front of the characters and a gentle stream comes rushing out.
Yeah. That
seemed like a missed moment. Again, you don't want to flood your characters, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm pretty sure if a water tower collapsed, it would be a torrent, like, you know, a mini tsunami, and not just, oh, we got a little wet, I'm gonna run.
It would not be a mini tsunami.
No,
if
I'm
a
just
water
saying.
tower collapsed.
I'm saying like the power of that water coming out of that water tower, just all that water coming out at once.
There's not
it
an
wouldn't be a
extraordinary amount of water in a water tower.
Yeah, have you
Depends
seen
on the
water
size of the
towers?
water tower,
They're
I'm
pretty
sure.
big water. Like, it's a lot of water in there.
Yeah, but it's not primarily about storing water. It's just about getting water up high.
Well, yes, gravity. I understand water pressure. Like, I understand the purpose of the water tower, but I'm saying that they are also generally pretty full of water. So you can provide that water for the people.
But I don't think it's like, well, I don't think it's primarily a well or a reservoir of like ready water. But like, I think if a water tower fell, it's not 100 swimming pools falling on you or something. It's maybe a couple swimming pools.
Still, a couple swimming pools is a lot of water. And in this one, it was a light stream came out of that water tower.
I've seen a guy cut a hole in the side of a above ground swimming pool and get pushed away by more water than that water tower.
just the pressure of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's a bad idea.
All right.
I don't even remember the water tower falling in this movie.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
that's how insignificant it was. As far
you don't
as a
remember when like
visual.
the oil, like everyone's on the ground just fine, and there's an oil derrick like whipping through the air that crashed in the water tower. I was like, all right, tornadoes can pick up oil derrick, can't pick up people. Got it. But I mean, but these, again, I think with these movies, to enjoy them, which I did, you have to, there's a big suspension of disbelief. It's not trying to be an accurate tornado movie, because that would be kind of boring. It'd be a bunch of people hiding in shelters. It's a disaster movie. So like, you got to have disaster things happen. So you got to go in with that knowledge.
Yeah. Anything else on Twisters, or have we said it all? Oh, cameos.
Oh yeah.
So the cameo that that was identified before we recorded by Kyle was Paul Scheer, shows up at the end. Do you think that's because haven't they done Twisters on How Did This Get Made? Like it's kind of one of their classic episodes, isn't it?
I don't know if they've ever done Twister on How Did This Get Made.
I thought they did.
Like
a while back, long while back.
Doesn't
Or-
seem like the kind of movie they would normally do.
Yeah, I mean that movie's been on, or that podcast has been on air for over a decade. So
Sure. They've done a lot of
Yeah.
them.
I mean, so you think he was in there as like a wink to something? I just thought he did. They just needed to cast someone, and
They just needed a
Yeah.
comedian to make a couple
Yeah.
of non-funny jokes.
That's what I thought.
right to like make a look like, come on,
Right.
like
It was
that's
actually
pretty much the
super
joke he makes is, come on.
It was super strange to see him all of a sudden in it, because I just know who he is, and then
Yeah,
he's the jokiest character in the entire movie, and he's right at the end. It's just that tonally was odd.
I didn't know he was gonna have more time. Like I thought he was gonna have a non-speaking part. Like, oh, he's the guy in the background, because I recognize his from in the background, and then he actually is talking on camera. So, the other one, which I didn't know about this at the time, I read about it later, is Bill Paxton's son is in the movie, and I think he is the male in the Motown couple that drives away and gets sucked up by the tornado in their car.
I think so.
So, did you guys think? I mean, should we talk about who's not in the movie?
Yeah. Anybody from the original.
No one. Wait, a bunch of them are dead, but the living
Sure.
ones.
Yeah. Helen Hunt was not in this movie, which again, like so many of these like legacy sequels trot out the former actors and actresses, and now they're super old, and it just seems so rote. And I'm glad this movie didn't feel like it had to do that.
It didn't feel. I did not miss her being in it.
I didn't
Like, I was afraid she was gonna be the mom when they, like they kind of tease the mom throughout. And I was like, oh, how silly if like this girl's mom is Helen Hunt.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they didn't do that.
I was thinking they were going to do that too. But I'm glad they didn't. I think where they missed the opportunity is with Helen Hunt, and it would have been super easy to have a mid-credits sequence. The young lady lead had just said that she's going to go back to New York and present what they've figured out. Mid-credit sequence, have the director of NOAA or some weather service walk in, and it's Helen Hunt.
Yeah,
From the original movie. You know what I mean? Just she didn't even have to say anything but one line. You know what I mean? Just show high heels of a person walking into a room, and then cut to Helen Hunt, and she says, "So, tell me what you found," or something like that.
Oh, she's gonna say, "So what do you got, kid?"
Right.
And then
whatever
credits.
type of thing. And that would have been like, for the people who have waited 28 years, because this movie's been in development for a long I mean, like over and over and over, this movie came up as a movie they're going to make a sequel to. They just couldn't get it together. It would just have been a nice payoff, a tie-in that didn't affect the overall story at all. And we all would have walked away and said, that was cool to see Helen Hunt again. But they just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I wonder if she wanted too much money. If they had something in the plan and she wanted like $500,000 and they're like, not worth it.
What should they have paid her to do that?
Lunch.
I think $200,000
For the post-credit scene.
For post-credit scene.
For half a day's work, probably. By the time you get there, makeup, wardrobe, shoot it, go home, half day's work.
Yeah.
Is Helen Hunt retired from acting? Like, I can't think of the last thing I saw her in.
I don't know if she's retired, but definitely slowed down in the starring role department.
She is not retired from acting. She was in Hacks, that TV show on Max.
Sure. Yeah.
And she does like live appearances and stuff.
Okay.
Live appearances?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
She like goes and speaks and talks about Twister and stuff.
Like at conventions?
No, like go a night with Helen Hunt.
And she talks Twister or like what women want or what?
Yeah.
She's also regularly releasing movies that we're not seeing.
Okay.
She was in I saw How It Ends. That was 2021. The Night Clerk in 2020. I See You in 2019. 2 movies in 2018. Probably the last one most people have seen is The Sessions 2012, which is not exactly yesterday, but was a fairly well-known movie. That's the one where she's the therapist opposite John Hawkes, who's paralyzed, and she's like a sex therapist that goes a little beyond the normal verbal therapy. That was a good movie.
I think Castaway is the last thing I remember seeing her in.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Or maybe What Women Want. Which one came out first? Castaway or What Women Want? They came around at the same time.
Castaway came out last.
Okay. So yeah, that's for me. It's probably been a good almost 20 years since I can remember seeing her in a movie or in a project.
Sure. That makes sense. All right. Anything else with Twisters? Or are you guys ready to letterbox it?
I'm ready. Got a letterbox.
All right. Let's give it a rating out of 5 stars. What are you guys going to give Twisters?
I'm going to give this a fun 3 stars.
I'm going to give it a fun 3.5 stars.
I'm going to give it a perfectly fine 2.5 stars.
All right.
So 2.5, a 3, and a 3.5 for Twisters.